Admiral Kong Minho stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance and watched the stars bend around his ship. 3 years had passed since Earth last heard from their friends in space. 3 long years of silence while humans built the biggest war fleet they had ever made. The bridge was quiet except for the soft hum of machines. Minho looked at the display showing 200 human ships moving through hyperspace. Each ship carried the best weapons and technology Earth could build. Each crew was ready to fight the enemy that had been destroying worlds across the galaxy. Commander Park Jiho walked up to him with a datapad. "Sir, we drop out of hyperspace in 10 minutes. All ships report ready." Minho nodded. "Good. Signal the fleet. This is what we trained for." The mission was simple on paper. 3 years ago, the Galactic Defense Coalition had asked Earth to help fight something called the Void Swarm. These creatures came from another dimension and ate entire star systems. The other races in the galaxy were already fighting them. But they needed help. Earth had said yes, but building a proper war fleet took time. Now they were finally ready. The plan was to meet the Coalition fleet at Kepler Station and join the fight together. Lieutenant Kim Sora sat at the communications station. She was young but skilled, one of the best radio operators in the fleet. "Admiral, I'm getting ready to scan for Coalition signals when we arrive." 30 seconds to normal space," announced the navigation officer. Minho felt his stomach tighten. After 3 years of building and training, they would finally see their allies again. The Coalition had ships from 12 different alien races. Together, they would push back the Void Swarm and save the galaxy. "Dropping out of hyperspace now," called the pilot. The stars stopped moving. The display showed normal space around them. Minho looked at the main screen, expecting to see hundreds of alien warships waiting for them. Instead, he saw nothing. Empty black space stretched in all directions. No ships, no space station, no signs of life at all. "Where is everyone?" whispered Commander Park. Lieutenant Sora worked quickly at her station. "Sir, I'm scanning all frequencies. No signals from the Coalition fleet. No response from Kepler Station." She paused, checking her readings again. "Wait, I'm getting something." The bridge fell silent as Sora put the signal on the main speakers. A mechanical voice spoke in the common galactic language. "This is Kepler Station Automated System. Station abandoned. All personnel evacuated. Warning, Void Swarm activity detected in this sector." Minho felt cold inside. How long has that message been playing? Sora checked her instruments. "According to the timestamp, sir, 2 years and 4 months. Captain Lee Do-yun's voice came over the communication system from his ship, the heavy cruiser Incheon. "Admiral, my sensors show debris fields where the Coalition fleet should be. It looks like there was a big battle here." "Send out scout ships," Minho ordered. "I want to know what happened." For the next 2 hours, human ships spread out across the system. They found pieces of alien warships floating in space. They found empty space stations with their lights turned off. They found automated distress beacons sending the same message over and over. Lieutenant Sora's face went pale as she listened to the messages. "Admiral, you need to hear this." She played a recording from one of the beacons. It was in the Altarian language, but the computer translated it. "Coalition command to all units. General surrender authorized. Repeat, all forces stand down. Cease resistance against Void Swarm forces. Surrender terms accepted." The bridge was completely quiet. Minho could hear his own heartbeat. "Play it again," he said. The message repeated. The words were clear. The Coalition had surrendered. Commander Park shook his head. "That can't be right. The Altarians never surrender." "They're warriors." More messages came in from the scout ships. Every Coalition world they could reach had the same story. Empty military bases. Populations moved to special zones. All weapons turned off. Dr. Jang Sunni called from her carrier ship, the Soul. "Admiral, I'm reading massive energy signatures moving toward the Terran sector. Whatever happened here, it's heading for Earth." Minho closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, his face was hard as stone. "Signal all ships. Emergency. Meeting in 1 hour. All captains report to the Defiance." The meeting room filled with 30 ship captains and senior officers. Their faces showed confusion and fear. These were Earth's best military leaders, but none of them had expected this. Here's what we know, Minho began. The Galactic Defense Coalition surrendered to the Void Swarm 2 years ago. Every alien race that was fighting has given up. They're all living under Void Swarm control now. Captain Lee spoke first. What about Earth? Do they know we're coming? Our long-range sensors show Void Swarm forces moving toward human space, Commander Park answered. They know we're here. Colonel Nam Sung-jin, the Marine commander, stood up. Sir, with respect, we should go home. We came here to help our allies. Fight. If there's no one left to help, we should defend Earth. And abandon the entire galaxy? Captain Jang asked. Millions of innocent people are living under enemy control. Better than getting our fleet destroyed for nothing, Colonel Nam replied. The room erupted in arguments. Half the officers wanted to retreat to Earth, the other half wanted to stay and fight. Voices got louder as the debate continued. Ho let them argue for several minutes, then stood up. The room went quiet. I've made my decision, he said. We're not going home? Some officers started to protest, but Minho held up his hand. Every race in this galaxy looked at the Void Swarm and decided they couldn't win. They chose to live on their knees rather than die on their feet. His voice got stronger. But we're human. And humans don't surrender. He looked around the room at each face. Signal the fleet. We're going to show this galaxy what happens when you threaten humanity's friends. We're going to show the Void Swarm why they should have left Earth alone. As the captains filed out to return to their ships, Lieutenant Sora approached him. Sir, the enemy has the technology of 12 different races. They've adapted to every weapon and tactic the Coalition used. How can we fight that? Minho smiled for the first time since they'd arrived. Simple, Lieutenant. We're going to do something no alien race has ever thought of. What's that, sir? We're going to fight like humans. The human fleet split into small groups and moved toward different star systems. Admiral Minho wanted to see what had happened to the Coalition worlds. Each group had orders to stay hidden and gather information. Major Yoon Hana lead a team of Marines to Proxima Prime, the homeworld of the bird-like Proximans. Her ship, the scout vessel Gwangju, dropped out of hyperspace far from the planet. They used stealth systems to get closer without being detected. What do you see? Hannah asked the sensor operator. The planet looks normal from space, but all the military satellites are gone. I'm detecting some kind of monitoring stations in orbit. They're not Proximan technology. Hannah studied the readings. Void Swarm. Most likely, Major, the energy patterns match what we found at the other sites. They landed the ship in a forest outside the capital city. Hannah took 5 Marines with her to investigate. The city looked wrong from the moment they saw it. The beautiful crystal towers that Proximans were famous for still stood, but they were dark. Strange black devices sat on top of each tower. The streets were almost empty. A few Proximans walked around, but they moved slowly and kept their heads down. They wore simple gray clothes instead of the colorful robes Hannah remembered from the diplomatic meetings. This place feels like a prison, whispered Sergeant Ko Minsu. They found an old Proximan sitting alone in a small park. Hannah approached him carefully, using her translator device. Hello, Elder. We are friends from Earth. The bird-like alien looked up with sad, dark eyes. Earth? You should not be here, young human. You should have stayed in your safe home. What happened here? Where is your military? Your government? The Proximan made a sound that the translator called a sigh. Gone, all gone. The swarm came 2 years ago. Our ships fought bravely for 3 days. Then the swarm learned how to copy our weapons and tactics. Our admiral calculated the odds of victory. He paused. 0% chance of success. 100% chance of extinction if we continued fighting. So you surrendered? We chose survival over honor. The swarm moved our people to designated areas. They took our weapons and our ships. Now we work in their factories and grow food for their organic ships. In return, they let us live. Hannah felt sick. Are you happy? The old Proxeman looked at the black monitoring device on a nearby crystal tower. We are alive. That is what matters, or so we tell ourselves. Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, engineer Choi Min-jae was studying captured void swarm technology on a dead space station. His team had found pieces of enemy ships from an old battle. The technology was unlike anything he had seen before. It was part machine and part living tissue. The metal could change shape, and the organic parts could grow and adapt. Look at this, he told his assistant, Lieutenant Bae Jin-ho. The armor isn't just strong, it learns from attacks. Each time you hit it with the same weapon, it becomes more resistant. Bae examined the sample under a microscope. How is that possible? The organic components absorb energy and material from whatever attacks them. Then they change their structure to defend against that specific threat. Min-jae shook his head. It's brilliant and terrifying. They found more disturbing evidence in the station's computer systems. Battle records showed how the Void Swarm had defeated each coalition race. Against the Altarians, who were famous warriors, the Swarm learned their fighting tactics and used them better than the Altarians themselves. Against the Vegans, who had the best technology, the Swarm absorbed their weapons designs and improved. Then, no wonder they all surrendered, Bae said. How do you fight an enemy that becomes stronger every time you attack it? Min-jae was quiet for a long time, studying the alien technology. Finally, he said, maybe the question isn't how to fight them, maybe it's how to fight them in a way they can't copy. Back on the flagship Defiance, Admiral Minho received reports from all the scout teams. Every coalition world told the same story. Populations controlled but alive. Military forces disbanded. Production facilities converted to serve the void. Swarm, Commander Park stood beside him as they read the reports. They're not destroying the conquered races. They're using them, like tools, Minho agreed, or resources to be managed. Colonel Nam entered the bridge with a grim expression. Admiral, long-range sensors are tracking multiple Void Swarm fleets. They're all moving toward human space. The largest formation is heading directly for Earth. Lieutenant Sora looked up from her station. Sir, I'm intercepting Void Swarm communications. The computer is having trouble translating, but it seems like they're discussing humanity as their next target. Minho walked to the main display showing star charts. Red dots marked Void Swarm positions. Blue dots showed human colonies. The red dots were moving steadily toward the blue ones. How long until they reach the outer colonies? He asked. At their current speed, about 6 weeks, Commander Park answered. Colonel Nam stepped forward. Admiral, I need to say this again. We should return to Earth immediately. Help them prepare defenses. Our fleet might make the difference in protecting the homeworld. Captain Zhang's voice came over the communication system from her ship. Colonel, if we run now, Earth will face the combined might of the entire Void Swarm. But if we fight them here, we might slow them down. Give Earth more time to prepare. Fight them with what? Nam demanded. They have the weapons and knowledge of 12 different races. They've never lost a battle. They've never fought humans, Minho said quietly. The argument continued, but Minho wasn't listening anymore. He was thinking about the old Proxeman's words, about the Altarian warriors who calculated their odds and chose surrender, about the brilliant vegan scientists who gave up when their technology was turned against them. Every race had fought the Void Swarm the same way they fought other races, with organized tactics, advanced technology, and logical strategy. When that failed, they made the logical choice to surrender, but humans weren't always logical. Minho made his decision. Signal all ships we're not retreating. The bridge fell silent. Sir, Commander Park said carefully, the enemy outnumbers us 10-1. They have superior technology. They can adapt to any strategy we use. That's what they expect, Minho replied. They expect us to fight like the coalition races did. They expect us to be logical and predictable. He turned to face his officers. But we're human. We do crazy things. We take impossible risks. We refuse to quit even when any sane person would give up. Lieutenant Sora spoke up. Admiral what? If we lose, Minho looked at the star chart again. The red dots were still moving toward human space, but they seemed smaller now, less threatening. Then we lose fighting, he said. And maybe that's enough. He opened a communication channel to the entire fleet. All ships, this is Admiral Minho. I know some of you want to go home. I know this seems impossible. But I'm not asking you to follow me because we can win. I'm asking you to follow me because it's the right thing to do. He paused, choosing his words carefully. The galaxy is watching. Millions of people who gave up hope are waiting to see what we do. We can show them that surrender isn't the only choice. We can show them that some things are worth fighting for, even when the odds are impossible. The fleet stayed together, not because they believed they could win, but because they were human, and humans didn't abandon their friends. The first battle happened at Ross 128, a system with nothing but asteroids and gas giants. The Void Swarm had chosen it as a meeting point for their fleets heading toward Earth. Admiral Minho decided to attack them there. The enemy arrived first, just as human intelligence had predicted. Their ships were massive and dark, looking like they were grown rather than built. The largest ones were the size of small moons. Covered in weapons that moved and shifted like living things, Commander Baywujan watched them from his destroyer. The Olsen, his ship was tiny compared to the enemy vessels, but he wasn't afraid. He was excited. "This is it, people," he told his crew. "Time to show these things what humans can do." The Void Swarm formed up in perfect battle formation. They had learned this tactic from the Altarians, who were the best warriors in the galaxy. Every ship had its place, every weapon had its target. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Admiral Minho studied the enemy formation from the Defiance. They're using standard coalition tactics. They expect us to do the same. What are your orders, sir? Asked Commander Park. Minho smiled. Signal the fleet. Attack pattern chaos? There was no such thing as attack pattern chaos in any military manual. Minho had just made it up. The human ships spread out in every direction with no obvious plan. Some went left, some went right, some went straight forward. The Void Swarm's tactical computers tried to predict the human strategy and failed completely. Commander Bay's destroyer was the first to engage. Instead of firing at maximum range like military doctrine suggested, he charged straight at the nearest enemy ship. His crew thought he had gone crazy. "Sir, we're going to ram them," shouted his weapons officer. "That's the idea," Bay replied. At the last second before impact, Bay ordered his crew into escape pods. The empty destroyer smashed into the Void Swarm ship's hull and exploded. The enemy ship shuddered and started to list. Its perfect armor cracked and bleeding strange fluids. The Void Swarm immediately adapted. Their ships grew thicker armor to prevent ramming attacks. Their formation spread out to avoid close combat. Captain O'Kyungmin was ready for this. Her Marines had been practicing something that no military academy taught. Instead of trying to capture enemy ships, they boarded them with bombs. "Remember, people," she told her Marines as they climbed into boarding pods, "we're not here to win the ship, we're here to break it." The Marines shot themselves out of their ship in armored pods. They cut through the enemy hull and ran through the corridors, planting explosives everywhere. They didn't try to fight the ship's defenders. They just ran around causing as much damage as possible before the bombs went off. 3 enemy ships exploded from the inside. The Void Swarm adapted again, sealing their ships against boarding attacks. That was when pilot Shin Yunji tried something even crazier. Her fighter had been damaged and couldn't return to the carrier. Instead of ejecting, she pointed the fighter at an enemy cruiser and used it as a missile, but she didn't aim for the strongest part of the ship. She aimed for a small sensor array that looked important. Her fighter's explosion was tiny compared to the enemy ship, but it knocked out their targeting system. The Void Swarm ship started firing wildly, hitting their own allies by mistake. Pilot Go Tae-young saw what Yeonji had done. His fighter was also damaged, so he tried the same thing. But instead of targeting sensors, he aimed for what looked like a communication dish. His sacrifice cut the enemy ship off from the rest of their fleet. The Void Swarm tried to adapt to kamikaze attacks, but they couldn't predict where the humans would strike next. Every attack was different. Every sacrifice targeted something unexpected. Lieutenant Commander Song Miran had the strangest idea of all. She was a chef before joining the military, and she remembered something from her grandmother's kitchen. The old woman used to clean metal with a mixture of kimchi juice and industrial cleaner. It ate through rust like it was nothing. Miran mixed up a batch of her grandmother's recipe and loaded it into her fighter's mining laser system. Instead of trying to punch through enemy armor, she sprayed the mixture onto their hull. The organic parts of the Void Swarm ship started dissolving. The metal parts began to corrode and fall apart. The enemy vessel died like it was being eaten by invisible bugs. "Did you just kill a spaceship with kimchi?" asked her wingman over the radio. "My grandmother was a very practical woman," Miran replied. The battle went on for 6 hours. Every time the Void Swarm adapted to one human tactic, the humans invented 3 new ones. They used broken ships as shields. They fired weapons in patterns that spelled out insults in Earth languages. They played music over the communication channels to confuse enemy computers. The Void Swarm had never fought anything like this. They were used to logical enemies who followed military doctrine, but humans seemed to have no doctrine at all. They just made things up as they went along. Commander Park watched the battle from the Defiance and shook his head. "This is insane. None of this should work." "That's why it's working," Admiral Minho replied. "The enemy can't adapt to tactics that don't make sense." The turning point came when engineer Choi Min-jae, who was watching the battle from a safe distance, noticed something important. The Void Swarm ships were changing too fast. Each time they adapted to a human attack, their systems became more complex and harder to control. "They're overloading themselves," he reported to Admiral Minho. "They're trying to adapt to so many different threats that their own systems are starting to conflict with each other." Minho saw the opportunity. All ships, maximum chaos. Every captain is to attack however they want, whenever they want. No coordination, no strategy. Just hit them with everything weird you can think of. The human fleet abandoned all military formation and attacked like a swarm of angry bees. Ships flew in spirals and loops. Weapons fired in random patterns. Marines sang marching songs while they planted bombs. The Void Swarm's adaptation systems couldn't handle it. Their ships started changing so fast that they couldn't function properly. Weapons turned against their own hulls. Navigation systems flew ships into asteroids. Communication arrays broadcast human music instead of battle orders. One by one, the enemy ships broke down under the strain of trying to adapt to pure chaos. Some exploded. Others simply stopped working and drifted in space like broken toys. When the battle was over, half the human fleet was damaged or destroyed. But the entire Void Swarm force was gone. Admiral Minho looked at the wreckage floating around them and felt a strange mix of grief and pride. They had won, but the cost was high. Good people had died to prove a point. "Signal the fleet," he ordered. "Collect our people and prepare for the next battle." "Sir," asked Lieutenant Sora, "do you think the other swarm fleets got the message?" Minho watched as rescue ships moved through the debris, looking for survivors. "Oh, they got the message. The question is whether they understand it." The message was simple. Humans didn't fight like other races. They didn't follow rules or logic or common sense. They just refused to lose, no matter how impossible the odds became. For the first time in decades, a Void Swarm force had been completely destroyed. And across the galaxy, on conquered worlds where people had given up hope, they began to wonder if maybe surrender wasn't the only choice after all. News traveled fast across the galaxy, even in a time of war. The impossible had happened. A Void Swarm fleet was completely destroyed. The story spread through hidden communication networks that the conquered races still maintained in secret. On Altair 7, a young Altarian named Keth heard about the human victory from a smuggler who dealt in illegal information. Altarians looked like tall, thin humans with silver skin and 4 arms. They had once been the greatest warriors in the galaxy. Keth worked in a Void Swarm mining facility, processing metals for enemy ships. The work was hard and the overseers were cruel, but it kept him alive. His older brother had died fighting the swarm 3 years ago. His parents had told him that dying for nothing was stupid, but when he heard how the humans fought, something changed inside him. That night, Keth and 5 other young Altarians snuck into the facility's control room. They had studied human tactics from the intercepted battle recordings. Instead of trying to destroy the whole facility, they just broke the parts that would cause the most confusion. They poured sand into the air recycling system. They programmed the loading robots to move cargo to the wrong places. They changed the work schedule so that the day shift and night shift would both show up at the same time. It wasn't a big victory, but it was something. For the first time since the surrender, Altarians were fighting back. On the prison world of Canopus, vegan scientists had heard the same news. Vegans were small, gray beings with large heads and amazing intelligence. They had created most of the galaxy's best technology before the swarm absorbed it all. Dr. Nalavex had been forced to work on Void Swarm bioships, helping to make their organic technology more efficient. She hated every minute of it. But rebellion had seemed impossible until now. The humans had shown something important. The swarm's greatest strength was also a weakness. They adapted to logical attacks, but they struggled with chaos and unpredictability. Dr. Vex began designing weapons that didn't make sense. A laser that fired in random directions. A missile that changed its target every few seconds. A shield generator that turned on and off based on musical rhythms. None of these weapons would work in normal combat. But against an enemy that tried to adapt to everything, they might be perfect. She shared her designs through the secret vegan science network. Soon, hidden laboratories on a dozen worlds were building weapons based on human illogical engineering. The most surprising change happened on Rigel Prime, home of the warrior clans. The Rigel were proud fighters who looked like armored lizards. Their surrender had shamed them more than any other race. Clan leader Thrak had ordered his people to accept defeat with honor. Better to live in shame than to die for nothing, he had said. But when his youngest son asked him about the humans, Thrak couldn't find a good answer. Father, why didn't we fight like the humans fought? Thrak had no words. The humans were weaker than Rigel warriors. They had worse weapons and smaller ships. But they had something the Rigel had lost, the refusal to accept defeat. That night, Thrak met secretly with other clan leaders. They formed an underground resistance movement using human tactics they had learned from intercepted battle data. Small groups of warriors began sabotaging Void Swarm installations across Rigel space. Admiral Minho received reports of these activities from Captain Song Heron, commander of the stealth ship Bizan. Her ship was deep in enemy territory, gathering intelligence and making contact with resistance groups. Admiral, you need to see this, she reported during a coded transmission. The galaxy is waking up. Her ship had made contact with 17 different resistance movements. They were all using tactics inspired by human chaos theory. Attack the unexpected. Break the unimportant things that turn out to be important. Never do what the enemy expects, but the biggest change was happening in people's minds. For 2 years, the conquered races had believed that resistance was hopeless. The Void Swarm was too strong, too adaptable, too smart. Fighting them was just a way to die for nothing. Now they saw a different possibility. Maybe winning wasn't the point. Maybe the point was to refuse to surrender, no matter how impossible things looked. The Void Swarm noticed these changes and responded with massive force. Their core fleet, the largest and most powerful force they had ever assembled, began moving toward human space. It contained evolved versions of swarm ships that had absorbed the best technology and tactics of every defeated race. The core fleet was led by something the swarm called the Apex Mind, an artificial intelligence that had learned from every battle the swarm had ever fought. It knew how to counter Altarian warrior tactics, vegan technology, Rigel clan strategies, and the fighting styles of 9 other races, but it had only fought humans once. And that battle had ended with the complete destruction of the swarm force. The Apex Mind was determined not to make the same mistakes. Admiral Minho received this intelligence from Captain Song and knew that the final battle was coming. The core fleet was 10 times larger than any force the humans had faced before. Even with the new resistance movements helping them, the odds were impossible. He called together all his senior officers for what might be their last meeting. "The enemy is bringing everything they have," he told them. "They're not taking any chances this time." Colonel Nam, who had argued for retreat from the beginning, surprised everyone by speaking up. "Admiral, I was wrong before. We should fight them here. Why the change of heart, Colonel?" Nam gestured toward the intelligence reports spread across the table. "Because we're not alone anymore. Every act of sabotage, every small rebellion, every moment of hope we've inspired, it's all because we chose to fight instead of run." Captain Zhang nodded in agreement. "The galaxy is following our example. If we retreat now, all of that stops. People will go back to believing that resistance is hopeless." Minho looked around the table at the faces of his officers. They were tired and scared, but also determined. They had seen what their example could accomplish. "Then we fight," he said simply, "but this time we're not fighting alone." As the core fleet approached, resistance movements across the galaxy prepared for coordinated strikes. They couldn't defeat the Void Swarm by themselves, but they could create enough chaos and confusion to help the human fleet. Young Altarians like Keth prepared to sabotage communication networks. Vegan scientists like Dr. Vex loaded their impossible weapons onto hidden ships. Rigel warriors like clan leader Thrak organized hit-and-run attacks on supply convoys, and on Earth, Admiral Park Hyun-woo led the construction of humanity's final surprise, a second fleet built in secret. Using technology learned from captured Void Swarm ships, the galaxy had surrendered once. But humanity had shown them another way. Now, as the largest battle in galactic history approached, conquered races across space prepared to fight like humans, chaotically, unpredictably, and with absolute refusal to give up. The Void Swarm had won by making surrender seem logical. But humans had never been very logical to begin with, and now neither was anyone else. The core fleet arrived like a dark storm covering the stars. Admiral Minho had never seen anything so massive. The enemy ships stretched across space for millions of kilometers, their biomechanical hulls pulsing with stolen energy from conquered worlds. At the center of the formation was the Apex Mine's flagship, a creature the size of a small moon that had once been 12 different ships fused together. It contained the tactical knowledge of every defeated race and the combined firepower of 1,000 battleships. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Sora from her station, "enemy numbers are beyond our worst estimates. I count over 50,000 ships of various sizes." Commander Park looked at their own force display. Even with the secret reinforcements from Earth, they had less than 3,000 ships. The odds were so bad they were almost funny. "At least, we're consistent," Admiral Minho said with a tired smile. "We've always preferred impossible odds." The battle began in 3 different star systems at the same time. The core fleet had split into 3 groups to prevent any human ships from escaping. But they hadn't expected the resistance movements to coordinate with the human attack. In the Vega system, Captain Huang Jisu led a suicide squadron against the enemy's left flank. Her ships were loaded with vegan impossible weapons that fired in random patterns and changed their effects every few seconds. The Void Swarm ships tried to adapt, but couldn't predict what the weapons would do next. At the same time, Altarian saboteurs led by Keth destroyed communication relays across 6 star systems. Suddenly, parts of the core fleet couldn't talk to each other. Ships started firing in the wrong directions or moving to incorrect positions on Rigel Prime. Clan leader Thrak launched the largest resistance attack in 2 years. His warriors didn't try to win battles. Instead, they created as much chaos as possible, using human tactics to confuse and frustrate the enemy garrison forces. But the real battle was happening in the Sol system, where Admiral Minho faced the Apex Mind itself. The enemy AI had learned from the previous defeat. Instead of trying to adapt to every human tactic, it focused on one simple strategy: destroy everything. The core fleet's main group began launching planet-killer weapons toward Earth. Major Yang Daesung held the defense of the outer system with a small fleet of destroyers. His job was to slow down the planet killers long enough for evacuation ships to save Earth's population. It was a suicide mission, and everyone knew it. All ships, this is Major Yang. Today we buy time with our lives. Make every second count. His destroyers spread out in a defensive line and began intercepting the massive weapons. Each planet killer was the size of a battleship and protected by its own escort fleet. The human ships were outgunned and outnumbered, but they fought with desperate courage. One by one, Yang's ships were destroyed. But each sacrifice stopped another planet killer from reaching Earth. As his own ship began to break apart around him, Yang managed to ram the last weapon and detonate it harmlessly in space. Meanwhile, Commander Lim Aaron commanded the evacuation fleet. Thousands of civilian ships were trying to escape Earth before the core fleet arrived. Her job was to protect them while they loaded refugees and supplies. This is Commander Lim to all evacuation ships. Keep loading. We'll hold them as long as we can. Enemy fighters swarmed around the evacuation zone like angry insects. Lim's escort ships fought desperately to keep them away from the defenseless civilian vessels. She watched her pilots die one by one, buying precious minutes for the evacuation. To continue, when her own ship finally took too much damage to continue fighting, she stayed at her post and coordinated the escape routes until the very end. Her sacrifice saved over 2 million people, but the real turning point came from the most unexpected source, Ensign No Jiwan, the youngest officer in the fleet. She was analyzing Void Swarm communications from her post on a damaged cruiser when she noticed something strange. "Sir," she reported to Admiral Minho, "the enemy ships are adapting so fast that they're starting to interfere with each other. Their systems are becoming too complex to control properly." Minho studied her data. "What do you mean?" "They've absorbed so many different technologies and fighting styles that their own computers can't keep track of it all. Every time they adapt to our attacks, they become more confused about what they're supposed to be doing." It was exactly what Engineer Choi had predicted after the first battle, but on a much larger scale. The Void Swarm's greatest strength was destroying them from within. Minho saw the opportunity and made the hardest decision of his life. "Signal all ships. We're going to crash the entire fleet into their command ship." "Sir?" Commander Park looked shocked. "That's suicide for everyone." "Not suicide," Minho replied. "Evolution." He opened a communication channel to the entire human fleet and the resistance movements. "This is Admiral Minho to all forces. We're going to do something that no one in the galaxy has ever tried. We're going to teach the enemy how to think like humans." The plan was insane even by human standards. Instead of destroying the Apex mind, they would overload it with human consciousness. Every ship's computer system contained artificial intelligence programs based on human thought patterns. If they could upload all of those programs into the enemy's network at once, they might be able to infect it with humanity's most dangerous trait, the refusal to give up. The remaining human ships formed up for their final charge. Captain Song Harren brought her stealth ship alongside the flagship. "Admiral, my ship can get you close to the target, but we won't survive the upload process." "I know," Minho replied. "That's why we're all going together." The human fleet charged straight at the Apex Mine's massive flagship. Enemy weapons tore through their ranks, but the survivors kept coming. One by one, they crashed into the biomechanical hull and began uploading their AI systems into the enemy network. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The Void Swarm's adaptation systems tried to process human thought patterns and couldn't handle the contradiction. Humans were logical and illogical at the same time. They made plans and then ignored their own plans. They calculated impossible odds and then tried anyway. The enemy network began to break down as it tried to become human and failed. Ships started flying in random directions. Weapons fired at empty space. The massive core fleet began to tear itself apart as its own systems turned against each other. Admiral Minho's ship was the last to impact the enemy flagship. As his bridge filled with smoke and sparks, he uploaded his own consciousness into the enemy network. Not to control it, but to give it one final impossible choice: the Apex Mind. now infected with human stubbornness, made a decision that no logical computer could make. Instead of adapting to the human virus, it chose to resist its own programming. The conflict between adaptation and resistance created a feedback loop that spread through the entire Void Swarm network, across 3 star systems. Enemy ships began shutting down as their computers argued with themselves. The core fleet, once the most powerful force in the galaxy, became a collection of lifeless hulks drifting in space. 6 months later, Admiral Park Hyun-woo stood on the bridge of the new flagship Unity and looked out at a galaxy that was rebuilding itself. He had been Minho's second-in-command on Earth, and had led the reconstruction efforts after the battle. The Void Swarm still existed somewhere in the dark spaces between galaxies, but they were no longer unstoppable. The galaxy had learned the most important human lesson, that some fights are worth having even when you can't win them. On Altair 7, Keth had become a leader in the new Altarian government. They still honored their warrior traditions, but now they also honored the human tradition of never giving up. On Canopus, Dr. Vex led a team of scientists who were developing new technologies based on human illogical principles. Their inventions didn't always work, but when they did, they changed everything. On Rigel Prime, clan leader Thrak taught young warriors about the day when humans showed the galaxy that surrender was always a choice, and some choices were never worth making. The new Galactic Alliance was different from the old coalition. Instead of following careful plans and logical strategies, they embraced chaos and creativity. They prepared for threats that made no sense and planned for impossible situations, because they had learned that the universe was a strange and dangerous place, and the only way to survive it was to be stranger and more dangerous than anything else out there. Admiral Park received daily reports from ships exploring the outer rim of the galaxy. They were looking for other threats, other challenges, other impossible odds to face. "Sir," asked his communications officer, "what if we find something even worse than the Void Swarm?" Park smiled and thought about Admiral Minho's last message, transmitted just before his ship was destroyed. "Then we'll show them what humans do when the odds get really impossible." The galaxy had surrendered once, but humanity had taught them a better way. Now they faced the future together, ready for whatever came next, because they knew that the only unwinnable fight was the one. You didn't fight at all. And somewhere in the dark between the stars, ancient threats stirred and began moving toward this strange new galaxy where logic had been replaced by hope and surrender was no longer an option.